Part 3 of 3, The Day the Desert Listened Back. By the time the counting reached single digits, even the coyotes had learned to wait. The hum under Groom Lake no longer felt like weather, it felt like a clock. Trucks came and went along routes that made no sense on any map, but the one beneath the ground. Guards watched the ridges without blinking. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. I told myself I would not go back. Then the man without a name didn't show up for our usual hour, and his silence weighed more than his words ever had. 2 nights later, a padded envelope arrived with no return address and a smell of heat-baked plastic. Inside were 3 things: a strip of film, a single page torn from a spiral notebook, and a keycard with its name burned away by a cigarette. The page held 6 lines of block letters. You don't steer it, you let it fall toward where you want to be. Project Echo is the field learning its own shape. They think the pieces below are inert. They aren't. Day marker, when the hum stops, go high. The film was a strip of stills, surveillance camera prints, lab light pale. A sphere nested in sculpted braces. A man in a suit reaching out and stopping short. A metallic wedge floating above a ring of black. In the last frame, the light was wrong. Not brighter, not dimmer, just angled as if the camera had moved without moving. The keycard was scarred, but when I held it in my hand, something in my wrist tingled like a low-current shock. I slept with my boots on. The hum counted down through the night, a pulse that had a number in it if you listened long enough. At dawn, it hit 3, then 2, then 1, then a long inhale that lasted so long my vision panicked and added flicker to the edges. When it came back, it wasn't the same hum. It was absence shaped like sound. The desert felt hollow. Birds flew and became outlines without voices. The wind touched my face and failed to announce itself to my ears. I climbed the ridge because the note told me to go high. The men in the white pickups were already there, faces turned not toward the base but toward the sky over us, as if expecting a ceiling to descend. None of them told me to turn around. One glanced at my hands, saw the keycard, and looked away like a man refusing to read a word that could indict him. Below, Groom Lake wore its daytime innocence, sun-bleached, harmless, ordinary. Above, the restricted air seemed to bruise. The horizon lost its hardness, like paper left soaking in a sink. Far to the south, the mountains shuddered once, not with motion but with misremembered distance, as if they were taking a step you couldn't see but could feel in your teeth. I set the thermos down and forgot to drink. The first sign was not light but weight. My knees grew aware of themselves, in a way they hadn't since childhood. The ground felt heavier, as if someone were slowly piling blankets over the world. Then a white glare opened on the lake bed, soft at first, no brighter than a spill of milk. It spilled against the day and made the day seem thin. The glare resolved into an oval that didn't sit on the ground or above it, but occupied a decision in between, like frost on a window deciding whether to be ice or air. It leaned. The air leaned with it. The pickups on the ridge spread out like chess pieces. No one lifted a camera. No one spoke. Somewhere on the perimeter, a siren tried to wake and failed, its voice eaten by the quiet that had become a thing. The oval tightened, like a muscle understanding it was a fist. The lake bed around it paled even more, as if it had remembered another color it preferred. Then a shadow moved inside the light, a suggestion of a hull that did not accept the word hull. I have watched aircraft for years with the devotion other people give to birds or trains. This was not an aircraft. It was a problem that had learned to carry itself. As it compressed, the air bent. The lines of heat shimmer on the horizon curled inward. The mountain with doors in its face forgot its seam for a breath, and then remembered it so vividly the seam looked like a wound. The white space above the oval folded, and for 8 seconds, long enough to count with human numbers, a thing with no seams and no exhaust occupied the place where the glare had been. It did not appear. That word suggests a performance for an audience. This was an equation arriving at its solution. On the ridge, a guard swore and reached for a radio that had become too light in his hand. In the base's southern quarter, a hangar door moved in a way rock should not move, and a convoy tumbled out of its own shadow. The craft, that's the word my mind insists on using, though it feels insulting, tilted not around an axis but around an idea. It leaned toward nothing. The air leaned with it again. The white trucks on the lake bed rolled and then stopped, as if trying to calculate whether motion made them more or less visible to whatever had decided to be present. The hum did not return. In its place came a pressure, light as the weight of a thought and then heavier, not on the skin but inside the bones. I swallowed and my ears didn't change. The keycard in my pocket vibrated a little, like something small trying to choose its own position. The glare flared, then softened, the craft fattened, then thinned. It was not unstable. It was choosing, exploring the edges of the room that reality had offered. I remembered his line, "You don't steer it, you let it fall toward where you want to be." Want is a human verb. I wondered what it meant to an object that masked space. The base had rehearsed this. Trucks took up positions in a ring with the kind of calm that only happens when a plan has been practiced, until it is bored of itself. And yet no one moved into the white. There was no rush to capture, no theater of triumph. The ring was not a noose. It was a perimeter around a fire that didn't burn. Containment, he had said. Some things you don't want wandering. The glare thinned to transparency. The craft, revealed more than shown, hung above the lake bed in a way that made above a lazy preposition. Surface reflections slid across it like rain refusing to commit. Parts of it were dull as slate in shadow, other parts glossy like fresh paint in sun. There were no seams. There were seams only if you insisted. I tried to register its size and failed. It was 30 feet across and also 10, and also larger than a house. It was a scale-dependent truth, like a coastline. When it moved, it did not. The ground beneath it changed its mind about where it was. The craft accepted the correction. It translated sideways, without crossing the distance in between. The trucks did not follow. They rotated their attention, as if tracking a predator with uncertain motives. The pickups on the ridge didn't so much as rev. The man nearest me glanced once at the sky, and then kept his eyes on the horizon like he knew the real danger lies there, in that long line where distance becomes a lie. To the north, something taller than a tower rose from a hole that had never existed in daylight. It carried a cage made of nothing I recognized, black as a subtraction, no corners, all curves. The craft's skin took the cage into itself as easily as a lake accepts a pebble's reflection. The cage did not close around the craft. It closed around the region that wanted the craft in it. This too had been rehearsed. This too looked frightened of itself. A heat haze shimmer lifted between me and the base, though the air was cold. I realized I was shaking. Not from fear. From recalibration. My body was figuring out where it belonged in a room that had been tilted by a thought not my own. In the cage, the craft steadied. Patterns crawled along its surface like candlelight on skin. The white trucks moved for the first time, slow and careful. The convoy from the mountain split like a cell. The siren found its voice for a single breath and died again. And above, in the sky that belongs to no one, the pale bruise deepened. He had told me once, that the first activation lasted 47 seconds before they choked it back down the throat of the lab that had conjured it. This lasted longer. I counted. 94, 95. Time didn't quite behave. It meant well, but it lost steps and then apologized by hopping forward 2 at once. My wristwatch didn't help. It insisted on 60, 61, 60 that never ticked. The craft swelled, not physically but as a proposition. The cage's curves brightened at their edges, then dimmed, then brightened again. The trucks held. A door in the mountain shivered, and forgot how to be stone for a moment so long it bordered on confession. The ground under my boots trembled the way a dog's flanks do when it dreams. The sky leaned. The craft chose a direction that wasn't there. The cage bowed but held. You could feel the field's stubbornness like tension in a rope. There was a sound then, not through the ears but in the jaw, in the roots of the teeth, in the tiny bones behind the face that anchor you to yourself. It wasn't loud. It was intimate. A note without air. A choir made of electricity, the rumor had said. It harmonized with things I didn't think could harmonize. The blood, the breath, the fear. For an instant, the desert felt crowded, as if history had stepped close to eavesdrop. On the ridge, someone dropped to one knee and pressed his palm against the rock. Maybe to steady himself. Maybe to ask the stone what it knew. A woman in a different truck crossed herself in a motion too quick for belief, more muscle memory than prayer. I stood there and watched and tried to keep my face neutral the way they had taught each other to do, even when the world felt like a train passing through you without slowing down. There is a story people tell when they run out of proof: the bodies, the autopsies, the cold rooms underground. I never wanted those stories. I wanted the machine and the field that made the machine possible. But in the instant when the note in my bones thickened, I felt, irrationally, that the desert had a witness older than dirt. Not a pilot and not a body. A presence that loved the quiet the way certain animals love heat. The field had woken something, or remembered it, or simply resonated with it, in a way that made the boundary between remembering and summoning meaningless. 90 seconds. The craft tilted again, a slow nod toward a coordinate that didn't fit any map. The cage flared. The trucks held. And then the pressure eased, not like a release valve opening, but like a decision reversing itself. The oval of glare softened until it was only day again. The note in the jaw faded. The sky unbruised. The mountain remembered its disguise. The siren, embarrassed, coughed in 2 short barks and gave up. The hum did not return. It left a hole instead, a silence shaped like where the hum had been. On the lake bed, the white ring dispersed as if instructed by a voice nobody had spoken. The knot tower folded back into the hole that hadn't existed, and the ground looked like ground again. Men climbed down from trucks and looked at nothing on purpose. A helicopter crossed the basin without strobes, low and fast, the way a man hurries through a room where someone he doesn't want to meet might be standing behind a door. On the ridge we breathed. A guard lit a cigarette with hands that didn't shake. I picked up my thermos and found it empty. I couldn't remember drinking. No one asked me for the key card. No one asked me anything. The men in the pickups watched the road behind us the way you look over your shoulder when you've told a secret and are waiting to see if the room heard. A raven circled once, said nothing and flew south. The counting did not resume. Whatever Project Echo had been tallying, it had arrived somewhere and did not need numbers anymore. I went home and slept without sleeping. In the morning, a newsfeed ran a story about a minor seismic hiccup in a county without fault lines. A second story denied the first. The denial sounded more plausible than the truth. That is how you know you are near something that matters. The lie fits better. Days layered. The hum remained a hole. The sky over the basin took on, at odd hours, a glaze like dried salt on a plate that has been rinsed but not wiped. Ranchers noticed their dogs waking at the same minute of the same night, 3 times in a row, staring at the southern horizon with hard heads and soft ears. A power company truck rolled out to repair a line that wasn't down and came back 3 hours later with tire mud from a place that hasn't had rain in weeks. The man without a name did not return. I tried to be a citizen again. I bought groceries. I apologized to plants I had forgotten to water. I practiced not letting my eyes climb the map on my wall to the pale rectangle with its red ring. It lasted 2 days. On the third, the envelope came, smaller this time, heavier. No note. Inside, wrapped in an old napkin from the diner where we never spoke names, was a sliver of metal no bigger than a thumbnail. You expect the story to end here, either with a revelation or a mistake. I held it. I felt nothing like a movie. No heat, no glow, no whisper in the blood. It was dull and heavier than it looked. When I set it on the table, a paperclip rolled until it touched it and then stopped. When I stood and backed away, my phone's compass lost its courage and spun, then pretended it hadn't. When I leaned closer, the air between the sliver and my face felt slightly thicker, as if it had been told to take itself seriously. I wrapped it again and drove until the road forgot it was supposed to be straight. On the far side of a hill no one had thought to love, I found a place where the rock wore the shape of an old sea. I set the sliver in a crack and piled stones over it. The world did not change. Birds laughed and went on. When I stood to leave, the hum under the soles of my shoes returned, so faint I could have convinced myself it was memory. I didn't tell myself anything. I drove home hungry and ate without tasting. That night, the mountain with the door did not glow. The trucks did not move. The sky stayed quiet. Around 2 in the morning, a low white plane slid across the window of my sleep, and I woke thinking of ash. I opened my eyes to darkness that felt like cloth. Down below the desert, whatever they had tried to keep from wandering had learned the size of its cage. Out here on the honest ground, the quiet had learned a new shape. He had said once, "It's not alien in the way people mean. It's physics that doesn't care about us." Maybe that is the cruelest comfort. If there were pilots and bodies and intent that looked like our own, we could blame someone, petition, bargain, threaten. You cannot bargain with a field. You can only build a room for it and hope the room is persuasive. Weeks passed. The base expanded again, careful rectangles added like addenda. The lake bed scrubbed off old chalk and learned new lines. The ridge pickups varied their positions by degrees, as if obeying a calendar whose holidays had nothing to do with people. The hum came and went, never again with numbers in it. Sometimes it sharpened until pebbles rattled in shallow bowls. Sometimes it vanished so completely the silence itself rang. On a Sunday that felt like a Wednesday, I walked the ridge alone. No trucks, no watchers, no manufactured weather. The basin lay white and guileless. Even the mountain acted like rock. For a long time I stood still, the way you stand in a doorway before a room that has held recent grief. Then something small moved at my feet, a black ant worrying a flake of mica. It carried the shard 2 inches, set it down, reconsidered, and adjusted its angle toward an invisible instruction. I envied its certainty. By the time the wind picked up, I had decided 2 things. First, if this story is a confession, it is not mine alone. The land told it with me, and the machines under it hummed a chorus. Second, the question people like to ask, what is hidden inside, is backward. The better question is what the inside does to the outside while it waits. I went home and wrote this down because that is what people do when they are braver on paper. I do not know if the man without a name is alive. I do not know if the sliver I buried will call to its kind, or if call is the wrong verb and the right one is resonate. I do know that on the night when the hum stopped counting, the desert listened back, and for 90-something seconds we heard what it hears all the time. What remains is a place with a horizon that wears a mask, a mountain that sometimes forgets it is a face, and a lake that learned to glow without water. What remains is a field that leans toward where it wants to be, and a city beneath us built to persuade it to stay. What remains is a silence shaped like a keyhole, and the thought, hard as a toothache, that somewhere not far beneath our feet, the room has already learned our names. If you need an ending, take this one. One night in late winter, I woke to a pressure like weather that had taken a wrong turn. The dogs in the valley did not bark. The coyotes did not try to be brave. The wind, a coward for once, hid behind the hills. The hum returned, just a heartbeat, then two, then stopped, as if counting had become a superstition it no longer believed in. In that pause, I thought I heard a voice with no words. Not a greeting. Not a warning. A presence aware of its own presence. Then the night relaxed, and the desert remembered how to be an honest place again.